Actually,
So we're talking to Sally Fallon Morell. Is that correct?
Morell.
Okay, perfect. Actually, I've been talking to Patrick about the history of diets and the historian Weston Price. So we would like to know a little bit more about it. Who was Weston Price?
Okay, Weston Price went to Ecuador, actually. So he was actually a dentist and he practiced dentistry in the 20s and 30s in Cleveland, Ohio. But in the summers, he took these tours to isolated parts of the world to find out about the health of their teeth and their overall health and their diets. And he found 14 groups that had perfect teeth. In other words, no cavities, no infection, and they had straight teeth. They had very broad faces and naturally straight teeth. And this was a stark contrast to what he saw in his practice, where the teeth were usually crooked and people had a lot of cavities and they were a mess. So he found these 14 groups, and not only did they have excellent dental health, they had excellent overall health. And then he wanted to know what they were eating. He wanted to know what kind of diet supported this perfect health. And so he wrote it up in a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And the short answer is these were nutrient dense diets. They had no processed food in them at all, no sugar, no industrial seed oils. All of the diets had animal foods in them. There were no vegetarian diets. And the diets were nutrient dense and especially high in vitamins A, D, and K, which we get only from animal fats, organ meats, and the fats of animals.
where were some of the places that he visited? You mentioned
Okay.
Ecuador, but I think he went
He
to
went
many other
to,
places, Alaska, Scotland.
yeah, he went to Switzerland, a remote valley in Switzerland. He went to the Outer Hebrides off the coast of Scotland. He went to Alaska. He went to Africa. He went to South America and the South Seas, New Zealand, and Australia.
Okay, did he go to Egypt, where I'm
No,
from?
is that where you're from?
Yeah, exactly. So
Unfortunately,
okay,
not. Yeah. But he did look at some Arab cultures in North Africa. And again, he found the same thing. The cultures eating the animal foods, and always they ate the liver of the animal, the organ meats. Usually they ate the blood. They used the butter. He was very impressed with uh, the ghee that they were carrying in big jars.
Yeah,
And
and here in Ecuador, it's hard to find saturated fats to cook in. Our two alternatives to cooking oil are ghee and pig lard, which is a residue from when they cook it up. But what do you think about cooking oil?
well, first of all, let me say pig lard is a great fat. It's great to cook in. That's what I cook in. And ghee is a wonderful fat. The lard will give you vitamin D, and the ghee will give you vitamin A. So
That's called clarified butter,
yeah,
where you
right.
take out the water. As a
And you
disclaimer,
take out
he
the milk
doesn't eat any
solids.
pig. He doesn't eat any pig, so we want to say that we're not promoting pig because he's from Egypt. But also at your foundation, because you have the Weston Price Foundation, where you promote the work of Weston Price, you formulated his discoveries into 11 principles.
Right.
Is that correct? Do you
Yeah,
want
but
to?
first, let me just go back to what you said about the cooking oils. You know,
Okay.
these oils have taken over the whole world. They're everywhere now. They're in communist countries. You know, you get Kentucky Fried Chickens in Russia. These oils are we call them industrial seed oils. They're not vegetable oils. They're made out of seeds with a very intense manufacturing process. And they are the number one thing in the modern diet that's making us so sick. It's the substitution of vegetable oils for animal fats.
What specifically do these cooking oils do in the body that makes us sick?
Yes, well, they're very unstable. They're not saturated. The saturated fats are stable and they don't break down. That's why they're good for us. But the polyunsaturated oils are unstable, they break down into the body into aldehydes, which are very unstable small molecules. And one example of an aldehyde is formaldehyde, which is what they pickle bodies with when they've died. And it's interesting that the undertakers now tell us they don't need as much formaldehyde to preserve the bodies because they're already partially pickled by eating the industrial seed oils. So yes,
would it include things like sunflower oil?
Yes, anything that's liquid at room temperature, you should avoid. The one exception is olive oil, which you can use in moderation to make salad dressings. But
not heated, I believe.
What?
Not heated.
Not heated.
The olive oil, you don't want to heat it up.
Right. Well, they do in traditional cooking. Kind of depends on the olive oil. There's a lot of variation in olive oil. Some are as much as 27% omega-6. And
I guess different cultures that Weston Price visited use different forms of animal fats. Like in Alaska, they use the whale blubber, and
right. And then they also use coconut oil. Coconut oil.
Where exactly did they use
coconut oil? In the South Seas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Weston Price Foundation that you have, so we know that. So, and also we know about the 11 principles of the Weston Price. So could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so we came up with 11 principles of healthy traditional diets. Not all of these were formulated by Weston Price. Number 1, 2, and 3, and number 11 were his. But we came up with others that really have to do with how to prepare your foods, whether or not you should cook your foods, how to prepare grains, fermented foods, using the broth made from the bones, the importance of salt in the diet. So we have 11 principles, a beautiful booklet that we've come up with.
Okay. So yeah, interesting. And we encourage people to go to the Weston Price Foundation so they can learn more about that.
Exactly. How about your book?
What?
Oh yeah, your cookbook.
Oh, my cookbook is Nourishing Traditions. It has been translated into Spanish, so you can look for it in Spanish. And I believe it's published in South America, not in Spain. It's printed in South America, I think so. And we're getting close to 1 million copies. It's been a steady seller. And then I also have a book on baby and child care, and I have a cookbook for children.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
And we want to ask you what diet is optimal for a baby and for infant development and for the mother who's pregnant. What kind of foods would you recommend for baby and for mother?
All traditional cultures had special foods. We call them sacred foods that they started at least 6 months before conception. So these foods included seafoods like shellfish, oily fish. Fish eggs was a very important food for pregnant women, and liver was a sacred food, butter from grass-fed animals, eggs. So all these very nutrient-dense foods. So
brown rice and applesauce and cotton candy, like not brown rice and applesauce and cotton candy like the kids today.
No. It's so sad. So and raw milk, we're big proponents of raw milk, which is definitely a nutrient-dense food. So you start this special diet 6 months before pregnancy and continue it through pregnancy, through breastfeeding. And these same foods go to the child when you're weaning the child. So the first foods for baby are egg yolk and pureed liver, like pureed chicken liver.
Okay, I have a 3-year-old daughter. So is raw milk safe for babies and infants?
Oh, absolutely.
What about the bacteria?
It's actually much safer than formula. There have been a lot of deaths from infant formula. It's never sterile. It's a big problem. And the other problem with infant formula, it's made with skim milk and vegetable oils, so it contains no animal fat. And the animal fat provides the baby with cholesterol, and babies cannot make cholesterol. So they need to get it from their milk. Mother's milk is very rich in cholesterol and has special enzymes to assure 100% stimulation of the cholesterol.
What about the bacteria? Sorry, what about the bacteria from raw milk? When the baby's born, are you saying start them out with raw milk?
Well, I'm saying start them out with breast milk, which is raw milk.
Right. But
And
like
by
after
the
they-
way, when you test breast milk, it's full of pathogens. So, clean raw milk from another animal is, in a way, it's almost safer, but I'm not suggesting it unless the mother is having trouble breastfeeding. And then obviously the next best thing is raw milk from another species. It's not formula. And by the way, if you buy formula, milk replacer for animals, the third ingredient is animal fat. Because vets know that for the animals to be healthy, they need animal fat. And after all, fat is in all.
So like at about 7 or 8 months, like about 7 or 8 months, the baby could start drinking raw cow's milk?
Well, we've had moms who couldn't breastfeed who started on day 1 with raw breast milk. The babies did very well. So
I love raw milk, and it's a lot cheaper in Ecuador than it is in the United States, and it's so delicious. And I understand that it has all the enzymes and vitamins necessary for your body to digest it. I think raw milk is great.
Well, it's wonderful for growing children.
It's way cheaper than the prepared milk as well here in Ecuador.
Really?
Like by 20 cents, maybe 15 cents a liter.
Yeah.
All right. And we hear so much today about these different fad diets. I have a friend who's a vegetarian. Some people go even further and they're vegans. What do you think about these kinds of diets? I know vegetarians will often substitute animal proteins with soy. Is this a good idea?
No. Well, first of all, there were no vegan or vegetarian diets in traditional cultures. They all ate animal food, and they all went to a lot of risk and effort to obtain the animal foods. And all the sacred foods for having healthy babies were animal foods. So we do not recommend vegan, vegetarian diet, especially during your child producing years. It's really child abuse not to give the child the food that it needs. You'll end up with all kinds of deficiencies, protein deficiency, vitamins A, D, K, B12, B6. You'll end up in deficiencies in all these really critical nutrients.
And normally vegetarians will substitute animal proteins with soy. So
there's 3 problems with soy. One is it's extremely hard to digest. Very hard for that baby to digest. 2, it causes thyroid problems. So depressed thyroid function. You don't want your baby to start out on this garbage. And 3, it's loaded with plant types of estrogens. A baby on soy formula has 13,000 to 22,000 times more estrogen in the bloodstream than a baby on milk formula. You want to start
hormone, isn't
like
it?
this? And wow. Boy babies make as much testosterone as a grown man for 6 months. And that testosterone programs him to express male characteristics at puberty. And if you give that baby soy formula, that's going to depress that male programming in the boy baby.
Interesting.
And how about adults?
Like when I interviewed you a couple of years ago, you mentioned this prison in the United States that had gone to a completely soy-based diet.
Well, they actually, fortunately, the men were so sick that they do give them animal foods now. There's still a lot of soy in the diet, but they are getting some animal foods. That was a terrible experiment that they did on these men.
You told me that the men had grown breasts and their stomachs were all...
There's more breast reductions in men than women, breast reduction surgery.
Okay.
Hey, well, when we talk about saturated fats, the conventional wisdom is that it leads to heart disease, high cholesterol, but you're really saying no. But doesn't eating a lot of fat make you fat?
Actually not. What makes you fat is vegetable oils and sugar. And as the consumption of vegetable oils has gone up, consumption of sugar has gone up. I think there's a connection there, and overweight has gone up. The other thing
And
that
I
makes
guess,
the other thing
sorry,
that makes people gain weight is MSG, which is in all processed food, the fake meat flavor, but it flavors almost everything. And
MSG, that's an acronym. Can you say the scientific word?
monosodium glutamate. It's free glutamic acid, monosodium glutamate. And this affects the hypothalamus, which it's the master gland. It regulates appetite and it regulates impulse control and regulates.
Could this be an excitotoxin along the same category as things like fluoride and aspartame?
It's not like fluoride, but it definitely is an excitotoxin for sure.
Well, one of my pet peeves is that all the salt in Latin America has fluoride added to it. So
Yeah.
just thought I'd
All the
interject
salt?
that. Well, you can buy like the Himalayan rock salt, or you can go to a
Yeah.
naturalist and get. But if you're eating at a restaurant, they 100%. Yeah, in fact, that's in
I'm shocked.
in all of Latin America. The conventional salt has fluoride in it. There's
Well, that's to
well
keep the
documented.
people docile. They've discovered fluoride. The Russians were using it to keep their zoo animals docile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's the real reason it's put into the water. But I had no idea it was being put into the salt. That's terrible.
yes, it says it on the label. But I'm cool because I prepare all my own food.
Yeah, well, you have to. You have to. Yeah.
Exactly.
Can you give us some other examples of animal fats that would be incorporated into a traditional diet?
Well, they always hunted fat animals. So if they were hunting buffalo, they would want a fat animal. The buffalo had a buildup of fat on the back, could weigh 50 pounds. That's what they wanted. And the Eskimo had the seal oil, which is very high in vitamin A, and they used it
In
for
Alaska?
yes, in Alaska. Used it for everything. Then the European countries used butter, of course, lard for cooking, and beef tallow for cooking. And beef tallow is the best fat for frying. It's very stable. And that's what we used to use. All the McDonald's French fries were done in beef tallow. And in 1984, they switched to vegetable oils.
I'm sorry, what year?
1984.
What year? Okay.
1984. And they said, well, that's so you don't have cholesterol. I mean, this is just so ridiculous. The whole cholesterol thing is bogus, and nobody needs to lower their cholesterol. Your cholesterol is the level that your body wants it. If you're under a lot of stress, you make stress hormones out of cholesterol, and your body makes more cholesterol. If you're pregnant, you need to make more estrogen, and your body makes more cholesterol, so you can make estrogen. It's just it's just a complete shambles. It's not true. And the one thing we don't need to be worried about today is our cholesterol.
Okay. And finally, could you please tell us a little bit more about the book, The Contagion Myth, that you wrote with Dr. Tom? We understand that you say viruses don't make you sick. So
viruses don't exist. They don't exist.
Okay.
They've never found a virus. They've never isolated a virus from the blood or the spit or the urine or any fluid in an animal or in a human being. What you see in the electron micrograph photographs, these tiny little round things, are probably an artifact of how they prepare the tissue for the process. But
you're talking about the test tube experiments, what's called culturing a virus.
Well, they don't isolate this virus, which is what they should do. They culture it, and they put it the sample in some cells, kidney cells, and then they give the cells antibiotics, which are toxic to the kidneys, and all sorts of other goop. And then when the cells break down, they say, see, that's the virus doing that.
With no control experiment.
And there's no control. They get the same result if they're not adding the sample from the fluids.
So why do people get sick? If viruses don't cause disease, how can we explain symptoms? I think I have a pretty good idea, but we want you to tell the folks.
3 things make us sick: toxins, malnutrition, and injury. And by injury, I also include birth defects and things like that. That's what makes us sick. And once you dig into it, you can find a reason for every illness. And I've done this for a number of them. I've written a big article on TB and what causes TB. And it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria. And let me just say,
tuberculosis.
I'm not denying the existence of bacteria. We can see the bacteria. But just because you see bacteria in a sick person doesn't mean the bacteria made the person sick. The bacteria act as a cleanup crew. They, clean up dead tissue, and they appear, for example, in studies on vitamin A deficiency, the tissues start to break down, and that's when the bacteria appear, the infection, but it's really just the cleanup crew. And that's when the inflammation comes.
Yeah. In that article, I think
the inflammation is the body's strategy for coping with the breakdown of tissue.
In that article about TB, I think you were talking about Robert Koch and how actually the TB bacteria is associated with iron toxicity. Is that correct?
Well, what I'm arguing is that he never proved that this was caused by a bacteria. Something kind of looking like a bacteria was present in TB, but it's also present in people who don't have TB. So
according to this model, how would we treat somebody who has tuberculosis?
Okay, well, TB is identical to a disease called siderosis, which is iron toxicity. And in the days when TB was so prevalent, people had cast iron stoves. They were burning coal, which is high in iron. There were, steam engines, industrial revolution, a lot of exposure to iron fumes. So one of the ways they treated it at the time very successfully was raw milk, because raw milk contains lactoferrin, which gets rid of the iron. So, and they had them sit in the sun. There's your vitamin D. They gave them cod liver oil. There's your vitamin A. I mean, they knew how to treat it. But people would go to mountains in the summer and breathe the air and the sunlight and get their cod liver oil and their raw milk. And then they would go home in the winter, and they all had cast iron stoves, heating their houses, and they were cooking in. And that was releasing iron fumes all the time. So it's really only when we started to substitute stainless steel for cast iron that it gradually declined. Now, TB is still the #1 killer in the world, but usually in third world countries, not in the States.
I want to thank you so much, Sally Fallon Morell, for being with us today. I'm so glad that we could finally do this, and we encourage everybody to go check out this wonderful information at your homepage.
WestonAprice.org. And then we have a website on milk. It's realmilk.com. And my own website is nourishingtraditions.com.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.